Hey everybody, this is Aletha here. Welcome back to the beginning of my conscious mindset chats. As you all know, I moved from Washington State to North Carolina, and it took me a few months, took me 3 months to get back into the gear of running things and coming back on with my podcast. So thank you so much for being so patient with me. But I am so happy to start again with this beautiful, beautiful soul. And I'm going to allow her to tell her story because when people tell other people's story, it's not as impactful as it should be. And so this is Alaine Duncan, and she is a good soul that is out there servicing the community like we all want to do. We want to be of service, but she is one of those ladies that are out there doing it and hitting the deck plates running. So without further ado, please welcome Alaine Duncan. Alaine, how are you?
I'm well. Thank you so much, Aletha. It's really great to
Yeah,
be here.
yeah. Well, thank you so much. I met Alaine via another close friend of mine from the Naval Academy, Jillian Richard, Dr. Jillian Richards, and you guys saw her in one of my podcasts. So if you haven't seen that podcast, go back to my YouTube channel and look up Dr. Jillian Richards, and I will post that link as well in the details of this video description so that you can also have access to that. But I met her by recommendation. Jillian told me to buy this book called The Tao of Trauma, which is written by said Alaine Duncan. And when I picked up that book, oh boy, it was almost like reading the very detailed and instructional recommendations for how we can identify and work through and actually almost not eradicate the trauma that's inside of our bodies. And so I want Alaine to tell me tell us a little bit about yourself, and then tell us how did you get into that direction of working about on subject matters trauma.
Right. Well, back in 2003 or 2004, I was driving in my car, and this couple came on the radio. They were being interviewed on Democracy Now, and their son, Lance Corporal Jeffrey Lucy, had come home from Fallujah, and he had fabulous parents. His mom was a social worker, his dad was a nurse, and they loved the hell out of him. Fabulous parents, but he wasn't able to live with what he'd seen and what he'd been asked to do while he was in the Marines, and he committed suicide in their basement.
Mm.
I was so moved by these parents who loved their son and wanted their son's life and passion and service to be recognized, and didn't want him to have died, for nothing. And I was kind of filled with, well, oh my goodness, the VA, like I could do so. I was an acupuncturist. I am an acupuncturist. I've been in practice for about 15 years at that point. I just knew that I could do something to
Mm.
help not only those parents, but those veterans, but also those parents and family members. So I sought out. I didn't know enough about trauma, and I didn't know enough about military culture at that time. So I brought the Somatic Experiencing Trauma Training Institute to my hometown, and we started training mental health professionals, body workers, acupuncturists, how to help restore regulation and balance in trauma survivors.
Mm.
And we've graduated a class of between 20 and 30 people every year since 2004. So,
John.
and I have this feeling like we're just right outside Washington, D.C., that the more we can bring a vibration of regulation to the DC area, that we're actually going to, one day, we're going to impact the world, because
Mm.
so many of the decisions and the polarization in society has its root right here in Washington, D.C., in our capital, in our politics. So my vision is certainly includes, like, I think of our nation as a trauma survivor. So we may work with individuals, but I hold a vision for, I'm working with families and communities and cultures, um, to help restore regulation so that we can
So,
go
Elaine,
into the go ahead.
You dove off the cliff and just kept on swimming down that waterfall.
I did. I have a
We
way of
want to
doing
know
that.
something about Alaine. Tell us who you are. Don't start
Okay.
when you were like 5 years old or something.
Okay.
Tell us a
Okay.
little bit
Okay.
about
Okay.
who you are and what you are. We just
Yeah,
discussed
yeah.
your acupuncturist, but what
Right.
else about Alaine can we hear about? And then we will dive into the trauma part and the book
Okay. Okay.
itself.
Okay. So my name's Alaine Duncan. I'm she and her are my pronouns. I am speaking to you from the land of the Piscataway Nation in what is now known as Prince George's County and Mary's Land. So you hear the colonial imprint of that. I think of myself as a person with wanting to have consciousness about um, my place in society, my place in the world, and to make a difference. I'm a somatic experiencing practitioner and also an acupuncturist. I finished acupuncture school in 1990, so I've been around since for a long time,
Mm.
and it's been a fabulous career. I've loved every minute of it, and I've done all kinds of really really interesting and exciting things with it. I spent about a dozen years in military medicine. I worked on research studies for acupuncture and PTSD, for integrative medicine, for compassion fatigue, for military caregivers, um, chronic chronic headaches for survivors of brain injuries, Gulf War veterans illness, lots of different stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The virtue of working for the VA for 10 years was I had access to so many resources for research and access to veterans, and it was really probably the most meaningful 10 years of my career. Was my time at the Veterans Administration. I loved the vets, and I loved being able to collaborate with other providers and kind of swim in community medicine. Really.
We're not going to dive too much into acupuncture, but I just have one quick question. You mentioned about your research on acupuncture and PTSD. Can
Mm-hmm.
you give us just a quick synopsis as to how can acupuncture affect the body or the mind or the spirit? Because PTSD affects everything, right?
Absolutely,
So,
absolutely.
how are we using in research, or even actualities? Not the research anymore because we're doing it, but
That's right.
research is just supporting the factual part, the scientific part of it. But
Right,
how is it affecting the recovery from
right.
PTSD?
Well, I kind of think of acupuncture as the perfect modality for treating traumatic stress, and I kind of like to call um, what we're calling PTSD which is kind of a shorthand. I like to call it too much, too fast without adequate support.
Mm,
So I kind of don't like the word disorder in there
right,
because it kind of says that people are broken and people are not broken. We
right,
feel broken, but we're not broken. And it's not permanent. It's not, we got called into operating at a very high level when we were in danger, and our bodies had to adjust and adapt to that. And now they need to come back. But
right.
they can come back. We're designed, we're made, we're organized to go into high arousal and to come back. So that's one piece. Um, the other thing is that the foundation of acupuncture is all about harmony and balance between opposing poles. So in Western neurophysiology, we call that sympathetic arousal and parasympathetic restoration or parasympathetic collapse. And in Chinese medicine, we call it yin and yang. But
Mm-hmm.
it's the same thing. It's the same thing. So our core principle of acupuncture is regulation and balance, harmony between opposing poles, and that if we can create regulation in the energy body, in the what the Chinese would call qi, that that our inner physician, our body, will take care of itself. That
Yeah,
will, yeah, we can trust that. We can
yeah.
trust that.
We hear conversations also in the same realm about the body. The body can heal itself if we allow it, and by doing certain practices. And so,
That's right.
I know acupuncture requires somebody else putting needles in you, but what are some ways that you can recommend to folks that are listening to consciously become aware without the use of acupuncture, but they could use acupressure?
Mm-hmm.
What are some things that you can recommend to them to just help them, their minds and their bodies regulate until they need to go to a professional
Right,
to
right,
do the high advanced
right,
treatment that
right.
is called for?
I like to recommend that people take some time to consider what's helping me cope.
Mm,
What 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 came into place that allowed me to survive? How did I get to here? And maybe it's because my grandma, gave me a sense of security when I was a small child. Or maybe it's that I came home from the war, or I came home from some hurricane, tornado, some awful natural disaster, and my dog was there, and my dog would sit on my feet and look me in the eyes, and I could cuddle with my dog. Or maybe it's my partner or my best friend, but to really try to our body, we kind of gravitate towards the trauma log, towards thinking that if we tell the story, we'll get it out and then we won't feel so awful anymore. But the truth of the matter is, if we look for how we survived, if we look for how we cope, if we look for the supports that helped us be here now, and consider, oh, my breath deepens. Oh, I feel a little heavier in the chair. Oh, I'm not going quite so fast inside. If we start to notice those kinds of things that are regulation moving in, that other dysregulated part is going to have less of a grip on us.
mm. So this mindful awareness of just the regular things, the routine things that are happening, like the
Right.
breathing, the heart rate,
That's
the
right.
muscle tension, and so all this is very somatically important to our recovery and our healing. And so
Right.
one of the things that we talk about in trauma is that sometimes we somatically just disassociate ourselves from our bodies and our minds and our spirits, and so this is where your book comes into to subject matter of the fact that we need to restore sensation back to the somatic portions of our bodies and our minds and our spirits.
Right.
So
So we could say, it's a little bit of a slogan,
yeah,
right? But the issues are in the tissues,
yeah,
So um, strictly talk approaches to helping someone resolve they're too much too fast without adequate support experience aren't going to in many occasions are not going to get to the root source of the disharmony that's
right,
that's there. We have to have community. Like, we're meant to live in community. We need to have a community where we can feel some sense of cohesion and belonging. So we can cultivate that by supporting sports teams for kids and going line dancing and being in the community theater, or things where we're pinging off each other and we're coming into relationship.
mm-hmm.
That kind of thing is going to be really helpful.
So when you talk about something like that, we talk about you know pressing the high believe button. Yes, social support is important to us, but nobody never goes into why is social support so
Yeah.
important to
Yeah.
our health and our vitality. So from your perspective, why is social support so important to our wellness?
Okay, I'm going to get a little bit into the weeds. If I get too far into the weeds, you pull me back out again, okay?
I'll pull you out there.
Okay. Okay, so basically, two branches of our nervous system, right? There's a sympathetic arousal, which is our mobilization response. It's our fight or flight. And if we live exclusively in that branch of the nervous system, we're not going to be very easy to live with, because we're going to be angry and rigid and reactive all the time. So we need a break on this arousal. There's
Mm-hmm.
two breaks. One of them is the parasympathetic, what I call the water break, which is the freeze response. That's the I'm going to dissociate and collapse, which isn't going to isn't going to help us be whole and all that. And the other is what I call the fire break. Now, the fire break belongs to the ventral vagus nerve, which emerges out of the brainstem at the front of the brainstem. It's the ventral vagus, the front, and it innervates the heart and the lungs. And it regulates, it puts a brake on our sympathetic nervous system without any stress chemistry. So it allows us to talk to our neighbor about their trash cans, or to our coworker who's constantly stealing our pens, without breaking relationship. We can deal with a conflict and still stay in connection with our community. So the pandemic, like when we didn't have as many opportunities to kind of massage our ventral vagus, to be in a sense of like walking down the street and crossing across the street because we don't want to run into somebody, that's not being in community. That's not being in our ventral vagus. So we've had these couple of years where we didn't cultivate that capacity to live with each other and to, try to understand and to be curious instead of in conclusion about people who are different from us. So we need to do things that are going to cultivate our ventral vagus so that we can mitigate our sense of arousal without going postal.
Right. And you mentioned, that's from another perspective, I can say vibrationally, the vagus nerve, not only do we feel better, but our vibration starts to elevate to a point where we're feeling so the oxytocin is coming out into our body. Even though oxytocin is one of the good hormones, there's other hormones that were activated because of the stress. And so we're replacing these other stress hormones with better hormones, and our body starts saying, oh, I'm happy. And because you're feeling that vibration that's elevating, you want to socialize even more. And we were born, ever since the dark ages, we were told we need to be in a group in order to survive the big dinosaurs and the saber-toothed tigers. We've been social all our lives. And so to take that away from yourself when you're in a traumatic space or in a space where you don't feel good about yourself, to take that social portion away from your mind and your body and your soul is detrimental to your health.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. There's another kind of curious thing about that ventral vagus that I kind of love a lot. So it innervates in the chest here, and it also influences the smile wrinkles and our ability to interpret facial expression and to discern the nuances of meaning and sound.
Yes.
So when we meet up with someone and we say, I didn't like how they sounded, I didn't like how they were looking at me.
Right.
Like maybe our capacity to interpret the subtle communications is a little compromised because our ventral vagus isn't nourishing those functions.
Wow.
That's one thing. Point. And the other thing is that this is where this wonderful interface of neurobiology and Chinese medicine comes into place, because the spirit of the heart in Chinese medicine, each of the 5 main organs has a spiritual quality. The spirit of the heart is called the Shen, means spirit. And the heart spirit is seen through the shine in the eyes. It's seen through the sparkle on the face. It's seen through all of these functions that Western medicine ascribes to the neurobiology of the ventral vagus nerve. So really, when we talk about the ventral vagus, we can talk about the Shen or we can talk about the ventral vagus, and we're talking about the same thing. So an acupuncturist can use acupuncture points related to supporting the chest, but we can also create conditions in our communities, in our families, that support that capacity for relationship and cultivating ability to, like, we can raise our kids in a way that they learn not to throw sand in their friend's face, but they don't learn that just by being slapped and told and shamed. They learn it through an experience of relationship. So they cultivate their capacity for their ventral vagus as they grow up, because we're born with only enough ventral vagus to find the breast. And after that, we need to cultivate with a caregiver, with nursing, with some goos, in our face, with eye contact, with co-regulation that helps us create auto regulation on the inside.
Right. Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
Alaine, I'm going to just talk a couple more questions. We're going to dive right into your book, and if you can just give us like a brief chapter summary as to what impacts that you were trying to achieve with those chapters, it would be really cool to hear. The Tao of Trauma is a must-have book if you are in training to be trauma-centered care facility or practitioner, or you just wanted to get some self-help guidance as to what is going on with my mind and my body and my spirit as I'm transitioning from something, as I'm going through a heated moment or activation of unwanted energies and thoughts that are going through my mind. So if you want to experience some self-help guide, it's a really good book. So hit it, Alaine. If you can
Okay.
tell us a little bit about your book,
So,
it would be much
yeah,
appreciated.
I'm going to tell you about my book, and I'm at the same time I'm going to be telling you about a course that I teach that's based
Right,
on the book. We use the book as kind of our textbook for the course.
right.
So, our core thesis is that there are these 5 steps that predator-prey relationships describe about how we navigate a sense of danger or life threat. And if we make it through all those 5 steps successfully, we're not going to have symptoms of trauma. If we navigate trauma successfully, we get through the other side and we recognize that now we're okay, we made it, we're safe, all of that. If we can make it to that place, we're not going to have irritable bowel or migraine headaches or digestive disturbance or autoimmune illness, lots of the things that happen with trauma survivors due to the physiology dysregulation. So the curious thing is that while it was a Western neurobiologist, Peter Levine, who first described these 5 steps, those 5 steps actually mirror what my Taoist ancestors described 3,000 years ago in a body of Chinese medicine called the 5 elements, the 5 element theory. Those 5 elements are reflected in 5 seasons of the year and 5 functions that are easily seen in the agricultural cycle, but it's true, but they're true in the cycle of life for every living thing. Organizations, institutions, even the threat response goes through these same 5 cycles. So I'm going to name them for you. So the first step is awaken arousal. So we notice that like there's a twig that snaps, or there's a pothole that wasn't there before. Like our animal soul that's associated with the lung meridian, the lung organ, wakes up and says something's different. If we're flexible in our metal, in our lung meridian, we'll be able to be curious rather in addition to being aroused. So we'll have a little bit of space around our arousal that allows us to be curious before we jump. That awaken arousal function then feeds the signaling threat function that belongs to the kidney and the little adrenal gland that sits on top of the kidney. So the adrenal gland gets lifted up and pressed against the diaphragm, and all of a sudden it's just squirt, 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 adrenaline, adrenaline, adrenaline. And all we can do is be in a mobilization response. All we can be is terrified, and that's what's going to signal threat. So that's the job. So the water element, when it's flexible, it sees both threat, like instead of just always looking for danger, it's also able to see safety. And it's able to support capacity for connecting with other people and making relationships. And this is the really important part. It's going to be able to distinguish discomfort from fear. So when someone pulls out a gun because they're uncomfortable and names it as fear, their water element is dysregulated. I think it's one of the most critical elements in polarization in American society, is to cultivate this capacity in our national water element to distinguish discomfort from fear.
It's interesting you mentioned regional, even national categorization of the 5 elements, because I don't think anyone has ever applied it in that portion, in that perspective or mindset. I mean, I guess we can say the Eastern medicine may have, but I don't think any society even associate their structural way of living around those elements.
Right. I really try and make it that way because that's what we need to be about. I mean, that's
Right,
what that suffering in the community level is what creates so much suffering at home.
right. Right. Of course, the environment
Yeah,
affects our behavior and our way of life, and whether we're safe or not safe. So
that's right.
for sure. So you
Yeah.
say number one is the awaken arousal. What was number two?
Signal threat.
Oh, signal threat. Okay.
Okay. Then comes mobilizer response. That's the wood element. The liver and the gallbladder are the organs. And if the wood is flexible and has a big capacity, then we'll be able to mobilize a response that's commensurate with the level of threat.
Okay.
Right? Like we don't want to be milk toast and unable to defend ourselves, nor do we want to be always angry and breaking down doors. We want to have a measured, a rheostat on our mobilization response. Now, in an ideal world, once the liver, by the way, is known as the general of the armed forces in Chinese medicine.
Right.
So it orients to threat, it strategizes, it plans, it mobilizes, it leads the whole thing. When it knows that it's complete, when it knows its job is done, it reports to the heart.
Mm-hmm.
And the heart is the supreme controller. And it says, Supreme Controller, mission accomplished, the kingdom is safe. The
Yeah.
heart then is able to, instead of sending out this powerful beat and erratic rhythm and that's commanding the whole system to respond, the heart can then have equanimity in its pulse rate, peacefulness,
Mm-hmm.
propriety. So the heart's job then is to restore coherence.
Mm-hmm.
When it's flexible and working well, we will know that the threat is over.
Right.
We'll know that we survived. We'll know that now our heart can beat in a steady, even rhythm. There were people that I worked with when I was at the Veterans Administration who were Vietnam era veterans. They would sit in the coffee shop and talk with each other. They could talk more accurately about where they served in Vietnam and what happened there than they could remember their grandkids' T-ball schedule.
Mm-hmm.
They were still living back there because their body didn't really know that it was over and that they were okay.
Right. And
Right.
and so Alaine, not to derail you from the five elements, I think you said all five.
No, I got one more.
You got, yes, you have one more. Let's just finish with that, and then we'll go on to the
Okay,
question that
sure.
I want to talk
The
about.
last one is called the Earth module, the Earth element. It's the organs are the spleen and the stomach, and I call it digest the gristle.
Mm-hmm.
So no matter how successfully you went through all the previous 4 steps, there's still going to be some gristle to digest.
Mm-hmm.
It always is, right? So we need to break those experiences down into bite-sized bits. We need to assimilate the lessons, harvest the lessons, just like we harvest vitamins and minerals and calories from our food. We need to harvest those experiences and then let go of what's no longer good. Just like we take a good poop in the morning and let go of what wasn't useful from yesterday, we need to be able to do the same thing with our trauma story.
Right.
And if the earth is really flexible and has good capacity, we'll harvest lessons that expand our life experience rather than contract it.
Mm,
Because
beautiful.
it's really easy if I got sideswiped by a blue pickup to never trust a blue pickup again.
Mm-hmm.
Or if I got assaulted in the woods to never go back to nature again. And that,
Right.
we want to have lessons that expand our capacity to live in community with each other.
Right, right. I love it. So let's just wrap that subject matter up around that with your school and how often you have it. Tell us
Right.
a little bit more about that, and then
Sure.
dive
So
into some really easy questions, Elaine.
yeah. So the course, the Tao of Trauma course, meets in 5 sessions over the course of a year. So each of those 5 steps, 5 elements is reflected in a season of the year. So the awaken arousal is about the clarity that comes with the fall. The signal threat is about the terror of the depth of winter. So that comes in the winter. the spring is about the mobilization response. We're pushing up growth. The fire is the summertime when we're in love with life. And the earth is the late summer, the time that we're kind of in right now. So we meet in over the course of 5 weekends, over the course of a year. And we go through the resonant correspondences and the ways to identify someone who's stuck in one of those 5 elements.
Beautiful.
How to recognize who's stuck where, and also how to use touch skills and interactive skills to help access what's thwarted in there, what's braced, what's collapsed, what needs to be restored to regulation and balance, so that the whole cycle can then work better. Right. So instead of just seeing the kind of general dysregulation of a trauma survivor, looking jittery or anxious or brittle, like we start to be able to see, oh, that person's a trauma survivor and they look like they don't really know that it's over. So I need to work with their heart. That person looks like they're stuck in always being afraid, and they're just looking for threat everywhere. I need to work with their kidney and their adrenal gland, because they're just signaling threat even when threat isn't there. So we see more particularly how to work with people. And I teach not just acupuncturists, so the class is open to medical providers, somatically oriented mental health people, nurses, docs, body workers. Everybody's welcome. All clinicians are welcome. It's a professional training. It's not a self-help group, but people learn and grow.
Beautiful. We will definitely be posting your link below also with the details of that. I'm going to ask you a couple of simple questions, Alaine. All the questions are simple, but I think a little bit of play comes into part at this last portion of our interview. I like to just shift our gear into just a little play and relaxing before we say goodbye to our audience. So tell us 3 ways you incorporate self-care into your daily life.
Oh, yeah. I eat a really good diet. I actually love to cook, and I try to buy locally grown food, locally grown protein sources, and I cook myself good food. I get regular acupuncture myself so that I can be, because it's important to me for me to be regulated, because then what I offer other people comes from a regulated place, and it jumpstarts what I have to offer. So I think my own self-care is really important. So I get regular body work and acupuncture myself.
Oh, nice. All right. So when you're having those days when you're just not feeling pretty or good about yourself and your negative talk shows up, what are some ways do you make it quieter or dimmer?
Right. I've actually been working on this a little bit. And what I've found is that when I'm having a blue day, if I can find where that blue day's issues are in my tissues, and if I can go there and just hang out. Like last week, I had this experience where I was feeling kind of down, and there was felt like there was a sandbag in my lower belly. And I just kind of hung out with that sandbag. And what I want to do is hang out with it long enough so that the activation cycle actually fuels a deactivation cycle. And when I stayed with it long enough, is I found a trough that went through it. So my breath could actually find its way all the way to the bottom of my body. And then I started to feel like I could cope with the challenge that I was dealing with, because I found this trough. So if I can not stay in the story and go around and around in my head, but actually go into where's the clutch, where's the collapse, where's the absence, and then just be with it with some measure of compassion or tenderness, that something's going to change as long as I bring it into my tissues.
Beautiful, Alaine. I keep saying Elaine, but it's Alaine. Where can people find you? Do you have a website, or do you have email?
My website is integrativehealingworks.net.
Okay.
And they can reach me at alaine.duncan@integrativehealingworks.net.
All right.
Pretty good about sharing my email. or watch my email. And I have a phone number too that text or phone calls work. It's 301-806-4003.
And again, we'll write that down in the description. Thank you so much, Alaine, for coming and being on here for a quick conscious mindset conversation. I want to give you, for those of you in the audience that know that I do tarot readings, but I also do oracle decks.
Oh,
a number from 1 to 5, Alaine. Pick a number.
4.
All right. So Alaine picked number 4, and it is the environmental awareness card. Isn't that so convenient to be? Let's see if I can find it. Here it is, the environmental awareness card. And basically what that says is we should all be aware of how we treat the environment, because the environment is what allows us to feel safe or feel good or feel sad.
That's right.
Around us. So that was a great,
yeah,
to pick.
And connects us with the earth, who's all of our mother.
There you go. There you go. So without further ado, thank you so much for your precious time, and we'll see you out there. And if anyone wants to join her course, Alaine is offering up a discount. So just if you want to sign up for her course, make sure you mention that you saw that on this recording, and then she will honor that discount that she's talking about.
Yeah, happy to do that. Happy to do that.
You're
a great interviewer. Thank you, Aletha. It was delightful.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate you. You're a great person, and I'm glad I know you.
Yes, I'm glad to meet you too.
Well, have a blessed day.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.